For my seventh birthday, my parents bought me a very small accordion. I guess a terror on the accordion when I was like 10 years old.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of our Meet the Member interviews. Our guest this week is Tom Charsky. Thanks, Tom, for being with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right, our first question is, could you share a little bit about your backgrounds and how specifically you got into sacred music and playing the organ?
Good. Um, I actually was kind of blessed because I had a musical family. Although my parents didn't play instruments, they appreciated music. We always had music in the house. The area of Binghamton, New York, where I grew up, was a very ethnic kind of area. It was settled by immigrants from Eastern Europe, along with Irish immigrants and also Italian immigrants. So you had different sections of the city where people tended to live, and the churches of those groups tended to be in those areas as well. So if you happened to be involved with the church, you got involved with the ethnicity of it as well, which was kind of interesting. So my parents grew up learning how to speak the language that their parents spoke, which was Slovak, because they immigrated from Eastern Europe. So both sets of my grandparents came through Ellis Island in the early part of the 20th century, and their children learned how to speak language too. Now, for the next generation, not so much, although we were kind of required to take it in school when we went to the parish school. They taught the language as well. But that exposed me to church music, which at that time in the Catholic Church was pretty much Gregorian chant or something of that nature. But then also, because we were an ethnic church, they would take all of their hymns that they brought from the old country, and they would use those throughout the year. So we would have specific hymns for Advent, Christmas, our carols, and Lenten hymns, Easter hymns, sung in Slovak, not in English. And then eventually we'd have some translated both in, you'd sing one verse in Slovak and one verse in English. So I grew up doing that. Do I still speak the language? No. Could I get through it if I had to? Yeah. But, it was kind of a good thing. I also fell in love, and you're going to probably laugh. My parents loved to watch the Lawrence Welk show, which was a very popular show back in the 50s and 60s. And I just really thought that watching Lawrence Welk and Myron Florin play the accordion was really cool. So I wanted to play the accordion. So for my seventh birthday, my parents bought me a very small accordion, and we found a great teacher who I took lessons with. And the lessons were once a week. And then as I got bigger and I needed a bigger accordion, we went from the smaller one to a larger one. And then I was sort of like I guess, a terror on the accordion when I was like 10 years old. And I entered a talent contest for the Elks, which was sponsored there. And I guess just absolutely undaunted, I got my suit on, my tie, and my accordion. I memorized the pieces completely. And when that spotlight went on, I was ready to do my thing. Well, come to find out, I actually won a $50 savings bond for my performance. So that was a good thing. But then I decided to move from the accordion into the organ, which was a little different. We bought a Baldwin organ for my home, but it was not one with full pedal board. It was only the one with the half pedal board. So it was more like a pop kind of thing. But I just thought that was really neat too to do. And then eventually I graduated into church music from there. So it's kind of an interesting beginning. The only thing, and I'll talk later about, is that I kind of skipped the middle step where I should have went from the accordion to the piano to get more piano technique and then go from there to the organ. But that entered into something that happened later in my career too. So
It's very
it
interesting.
was good.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you went from accordion to the organ. What was that transition like, going from the one instrument to the other?
Well, the difference was on the accordion, you had keys on one side, you had buttons on the other. So your left hand was used to playing buttons and not kind of keyboard things. So when you went to the organ, you had to begin with getting that situated. And then initially with the Baldwin, you didn't have to do anything except your left foot, because your right foot was on the expression pedal all the time. The harder part, like most of us go through, is coordinating between the two. But I didn't seem to have too much of a difficulty with it, which was good. I didn't feel the need to look down all the time to make sure I was playing what I needed to play. So it was being done more by feel
Mhm.
and intuition as to where you needed to work. But it was good. It was a good thing to do that. I do think though that if I had to do it over again, definitely the piano would have come in there a lot sooner and then moved to the organ. But
Sure.
who knew, at that point?
Right, right. How old were you when you made that transition to the organ?
I think I was like around maybe like 13,
Okay.
13 or 14, because I remember playing a lot in high school. And then it was towards the end of high school when I actually went in to play a regular pipe organ that we had in our church. It was interesting. The church back in the 20s, there was a very wealthy industrialist in Binghamton who had a lot of the immigrants working for him in his business. And he was very generous to the churches. So he was the one who made the major donation to our church back in the 20s to put in a Kilgan pipe organ,
Mm.
which was like unbelievable at that point. It was a three manual, pretty much a lot of enclosed, work at that point. But nonetheless, I always grew up hearing a pipe organ. I never heard, an electronic or a digital instrument at
Mhm.
that point. So it was good, and that's one that I got to play. Was it what we would think of as the organ registrations of today? No, it was the organ registrations of that time, mostly because Kilgan was German. It was like more of a German romantic approach. You didn't have the German Baroque at that point coming in, but it was still good, a good instrument to play, and you got to, have a fairly decent sound out of it, which was
Mm.
good. So I was always exposed to a pipe organ, not to anything else in church, which was great.
Right, right. Oh, wonderful. If you'd be willing to share, what are some of your proudest moments or some highlights from your work in the field of music or in the field of sacred music specifically?
Okay, well, I think the 10-year-old accordionist was my first taste of the spotlight, if you want to put it that
Mm.
way. The other thing I think was that when I was working in high school to choose a university to go to for music, um, I played a recital that at that time, I didn't go to the audition. I actually submitted a recording, and all of the schools were ones that I would be accepted to. I chose actually to go down to Washington, D.C. to Catholic University School of Music. It was a very big school at that time between undergraduate and graduate students. But I liked the campus very much. I liked the whole approach to the audition process that we went through. And when I got there, I really liked it. I mean, I just felt very much at home with it. After the first semester, when the academic grades came out, I had a very high average, and that was very encouraging. I also was able to get a good scholarship to help in terms of going there, which was great because again, private school tuition versus public, even back then, was still substantially different. So that was one. Getting my degree actually in music education was important. When I went to Catholic University, although I thought I wanted to study organ, they suggested then that I go and I take piano. So for music education, I actually started piano lessons in college, which was a little late. But I had a wonderful teacher, a woman who was there. So for music ed, we had piano as our major instrument, and then we had secondary voice. So we had a private voice teacher, like 30 minutes for a lesson once a week. But then we had an hour lesson for our major every week. So I learned a lot on the piano. Was it basic things? Well, yeah, like the beginnings of Bach and things that probably other students would have done, but obviously more geared for, college work. Did I like that? I did. However, at the end of my freshman year and getting more piano technique, I then said, could I possibly also no longer have to take voice, but go into organ and piano? And the chair said, yes, that would be fine. So then I started with a professor who was an adjunct, but he taught at his church in Maryland, where he had a four-manual Moeller pipe organ that was only about 4 years old. So you think this is the early 70s. That was a very hefty instrument to go to and to play. He was also a wonderful teacher. He had his degree from Peabody, but he got his master's from the School of Church Musicians at Washington National Cathedral, which is where Leo Sowerby was the director at that time. So it was good pedagogy there in terms of what you were getting. It was fabulous. So that was probably a good moment finishing that degree. My third highlight would have been moving here to New Jersey, and actually as a young person right out of college, I got a church position full time in Clifton for a parish that at that time was 2,000 families big.
Mm.
So it was a huge job. And I was playing 6 services a weekend, plus the first year I was there, 80 funerals and 80 weddings. So it was a very busy. I'm glad I was young at that point because it was a big job, and also resurrecting the choir. Also, they were getting into contemporary music at that point with their young persons group. So that was big. And then I'd say the last one was finishing my master's. It took a long time to do that. I did it part time, summers, and then I finished it up. And I did play a recital down at Catholic U, but except my teachers now had changed, I was able to study with Peter Marshall, who was a very, very fine organist. In my last year and a half of preparation for that recital, I would take the train down to Washington, have a 2-hour lesson, and then take the train back to New Jersey. So again, I was glad I was young at that point in time to do this. But he was fabulous, and I played the master's recital on a 3-manual Schutte tracker instrument. So now it's amazing to go from the Kilgan originally to what was the organ at St. Paul's, which was a fine pipe organ too, to now playing on a tracker. So my career kind of spanned that transition period, when we were moving into more of a neo-Baroque kind of approach to things. However, that Schutte was really a great design because you could play almost anything on it. It wasn't just a Baroque instrument. It was pretty well refined for a tracker. So I would say those were the biggest things. Other than that, I got a job teaching full-time public school music. So that was my main goal in life. And then I also was able to still do church work as a substitute. I didn't take a full-time position. I just preferred to be a substitute once I was teaching full-time. So those were like the highlights, of like my career in church, how I got to church music in that regard.
Right. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Do you have a favorite composer or era of music? And if so, why do you prefer them or that era?
All right. Actually, I like 2 specific eras. One is Baroque, because when I was in school, I played a lot of Bach. And I thought that was a really great thing to be able to do. I started like with the early 8 little preludes and fugues. And then once I got those under my belt, then we branched off into the bigger works, which was fine. So that when I eventually played on my master's recital, the Passacaglia fugue, that was like the highlight of reaching Bach. I enjoyed the chorale preludes. I will be honest and tell you that the style of teaching for Bach back in the 70s had not reached its neo-Baroque enthusiasm, and the whole idea of the pedal technique had not yet transitioned into the more toes approach, rather that we used heel and toe, but you could still make it work, in terms of the separation necessary down there in the pedal part. So that was good. Did I find that transitioning into the toe approach was a little bit tricky? Yeah, I'm still doing that. I decided to take this year, especially, go back into those 8 little preludes and fugues and relearn them just using toes.
Mm.
So is that a challenge? Yeah, when you're used to playing them the other way. However, I've just rediscovered some things that I think are really good doing it that way. So I'll do some of the chorale preludes from the Orgelbuchlein. I also learned some of the grade 18 chorales, and I would like to do that with them as well. Will this take time? Yeah, but there's no rush, But as I'm playing them or preparing them, if I have to sub in a church, I say, okay, this one's now ready to go. Let's try it and see what happens. So I like Bach. The pre-Baroque composers I enjoy. Buxtehude's works I enjoyed. Telemann's music I enjoy quite a bit. And then I must be honest and tell you, I do like some of the romantic school, like Mendelssohn's works. I find very accessible. I prefer to play his music. And then I moved pretty much into the French school. I just am fascinated with Widor's music, fascinated with Viern's music. On my master's recital, I did the Prelude and Fugue on the Name of Alain. And so I'm fascinated with, those pieces from the 20th century too. Um, I enjoyed Duruflé's compositions, although they're few. They're a challenge. They're beautiful to play. They're beautiful to listen to. Um, but contemporary works, I don't know. I like Dupre's music. I have played quite a bit of it. Of the later 20th century composers, I tend to play things that are more service based, not necessarily recital pieces, by those composers. And there's many of those. But I would say if I really had two choices, I would say Bach, and then I would say the French school, especially Widor, Vierne, and Duruflé, Dupre. Those four would be my favorite.
And if I could just ask a follow-up question, what specific attributes of the French school of organ music are you drawn to?
Well, I think one of the things is that it challenges you not only technically, but it challenges you, especially with registration.
Mm.
Like I also left out Franck. I played a number of Franck works, like the third chorale I enjoyed very, very much. You have to really be attuned to thinking about what those sounds of those compositions were on a French instrument in a French acoustic in a very live building. And then think about what you can do when you're in a much less favorable acoustic environment in an American church, especially if it's a carpeted, seat cushioned church that looks like a very high reverberant building. And then you play the first note and find out it doesn't last very long. So you have to think about the adaptation that's necessary to do that. I've been blessed because the church where I had my main position when I started right out of school was a neo-Gothic building that was constructed in like 1938. So the floor was all solid terrazzo, the walls were all plaster, and it was a very high ceiling. And there was no seat cushions and no carpet anywhere. So when you played in that building, you got the idea, of what it was like. I also had the chance when I was in college at Catholic University, a big difference, yeah, to play down at the National Shrine in Washington, which is a huge building, it seats about 2,000, and it's all mosaic and stone. So you played on what was a Moeller organ at that point, a 4-manual Moeller, a beautiful acoustic there. So you got the idea of what would happen, in terms of that. I think that's the greatest thing that the French school, besides the beauty of the music, is giving you the challenge to be technically challenged to play it, and also to think about what you would do in a specific acoustic and what kind of registrations you might have to use that you might not have on an American organ versus what was a French organ, and still make it sound effective. Sometimes you can play it, and sometimes you might as well just say, this is not going to work on that particular organ, and as much as you would want to do it, it's probably not a good idea.
Right. If you could offer some advice to organists starting out in their career, what would you share?
Well, the first would be, don't make the mistake I did of leaving piano out of the mix. I think it's important, so that if you have a student that is interested in music and says, well, I really would like to play the organ, I would say, all right, how about if we do piano lessons along with some beginning organ lessons? All right. Now, if I was teaching privately here in my home where I have a piano and an organ, that would be ideal to work. If I was working in a church where there was a pipe organ or any organ in a church, that would be ideal for the student. Okay, let's begin our lessons with your piano works. And then from there, let's go to the organ and see what we can do with that. I think that would be much more helpful. I'm curious to know from my own things, and I think like our pipe organ encounters that the AGO has would probably give some credence to whether or not when students come to take those, how many of those students have had piano background,
Mm.
and then or are just coming to the organ because they think it's a cool thing to do, and then find out that maybe they're super talented and they don't need the piano background and they can make it work. More
Mm.
power to them if they could do that. But I really think that would be something that might, at pipe organ encounters, be a very positive thing to
Mm.
guide them, to say, look, you really could use some more piano technique to help you. Try it out. And yet you probably could have some other students that say, I can handle this without a problem, and
Right.
more power to them for doing it. But that was my advice. Don't be afraid to allow them to play the instrument, to hear it, to go in the chambers and see how the pipes and everything are put together. I think children are fascinated by that. I know when I taught in the school that was connected with the church in my first position, I had the seventh and eighth graders come over to church and we took a tour of the organ. And it was amazing because the principal said, no one ever took them there to see this.
Mm.
I said, well, they're in church, they hear the organ, but they might want to be curious to see how it works and where it is and how it's put together and how complicated it is, in terms of the mechanism. So that helped quite a bit. And I think it's great if chapters and the AGO, and on the national level, just really encourages this, because that is the next generation, of organists that will be there at the bench, and we need those people. We really do. So
Right.
that's my first thing I would do to help them. Second thing is, don't be afraid to give them the opportunity to play in church. Like, even if you're the main organist
Mm.
and you have somebody who has gotten to the point where they're ready to play a prelude, well, let them experience that on a Sunday morning, and just have that opportunity, for them to say, "Wow, I actually played in front of an audience for the first time," or "I was able to help set a mood for the congregation for worship with my prelude that particular day." I think that's very, very positive and very encouraging for them to do. And then you sit down at the organ and they can watch what you do. So
Mm.
to me, that was a good connection there.
Mm. Yeah, that's wonderful advice. Thanks. And talking about the AGO, what brought you to the AGO and what have you gleaned from being a member and a leader in the chapter?
Okay. In college, where I was, I didn't really know about the AGO at that point. So when I moved here to New Jersey, the organ builders, it was the Paragello company who had put the organ in St. Paul's and Clifton. They said, "Are you aware of the local AGO chapter?" And I said, "No, I would love to be able to go and join." So that was in 1975. So this then would make it for me my 46th year as a member of the Northern New Jersey chapter. And that's how it all started. So I've been pretty much in the chapter for all those years. They invited me to become a class member originally to get me more involved. And then I joined. For many years, I was the auditor. Actually, around 20 years or so, I was one of the auditors that would help to audit the accounts at the end of the year. That was fine. I then became sub-dean, and then I became dean of the chapter, um, which is where we made some great changes. I think the first year or the second year I was dean was when we actually switched over our newsletter and developed an email list.
Mm.
Other than that, all of our newsletter used to be mailed out to the members on a bulk mail permit, once a month. So that was a very tedious type of thing compared to this. That was the first go round. Was it challenging? Yeah, because not a lot of members at that point were on the internet. So we were still mailing out a number of newsletters, but that helped to kind of get us pushed into the digital side of things, which was a good thing. It's
Mhm.
helped, especially now, that we're virtual with a lot of our work, or we communicate a lot with emails, especially through the newsletter.
Mhm.
So that was my involvement. I've been off the board for a while, and then I was on the board again, the executive board for a while, and then I've been asked to do a lot of work with the nominations committee, for the chapter over time, which I've gladly done. I
Mm.
also got very involved with the Rodland Scholarship, where they would ask me to review the applications for those who applied for that. and write comment sheets out and then return all of those to Gloria Norton
Mhm.
so that the committee could choose the winners for those competitions. I found that really great to do, to listen to their performances recorded and then to be able to read the bios and the other information. That was really good. I enjoyed that a lot. And then now with the situation with chapter, I'm back in as treasurer right now to help out because of a person who has moved, which was David. So, I'm still around. I plan to be around for a while. I enjoy it. I think seeing members, although now not in person, is a good thing. We have a lot in common. I think we have a lot to share, and also listening, even virtually, to questions and things that we've raised about how to make music in this type of situation. I think is very important. It's very valuable. I don't know how you could be an organist and really not think of being a member of an AGO chapter because there's so much that's offered there.
Hmm. That's great. And last question, could you briefly describe your current instrument that you have at your church, if you're in a current position now, or are you subbing? Or
I'm
maybe
subbing.
your favorite instrument at a
Well,
church that you've worked
okay, I'll tell you the three that I play most often. How's
at?
that?
Okay.
The first one is my own parish in Bloomfield, St. Valentine Church. They have a three manual 30 rank Paragello instrument that was put in the late 70s. And it's in an acoustic that everybody would die for. It's all stone building. So
Mm,
terrazzo floors, very reverberant space. The original console put in back then was recently changed out and refurbished and a new one put in. So it's working. It's very much a French design in there with an exposed positive division. But you can play anything on it and it works extremely well for services. So that's number one. Number two, I do a lot of work as a substitute at St. Anthony's Church in Hawthorne, where there is a three manual Allen Diane Bish model. It's been toyed with. The organist there has had Alan in, and we've done some judicious quote revoicing
mm,
to make it all work. It also has an extensive digital aspect to it, so you can pretty much do what you need. The acoustic is good. There is carpet and seat cushions, but it's a very high domed church with plaster walls and hard ceilings, so it's not as acoustically unfavorable as you might think. And the third instrument I play a lot is at Our Lady of the Valley Church in Wayne, which is a Paragello instrument, three manual. It was originally a two manual Moeller put in at the end of Moeller's time period in the late 80s or early 90s. And it's been redone into a three manual where the positive and the grate are Moeller along with additional pipes. And then the swell division is basically digital.
mm.
Um, Eventually, I hope that they can replace the swell and put in real pipes. But it functions very well, with the combination of the two. So those are the ones where I play most of the time. Have I been in other churches playing other organs? Yes. I substitute in Episcopal churches where most of the time I encounter pipe organs.
Mhm.
Occasionally, I played in Lutheran churches. But mainly, most of my work has been in Roman Catholic churches where the organists there know me and I know them. So I'm called on quite often to play, which is great. So those are about the instruments that I would say the best. My home church, I just love playing there when I am called to play. I do mostly funerals. We have a regular organist on the weekends, but he has a school position during the week. So I get to go there and tackle that, which is fine. So those are ones that I like the best.
Nice. Right. Um, and we've reached the end of our time together, but do you have anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers?
The only thing I would think is knowing the sort of what you might say semi-crisis building with organists in this country because of the lack of younger people coming into the profession.
Mhm.
I think anything that we can do, even at my age, to encourage people, or students, even at the university level where I taught. I was an adjunct at William Patterson for 19 years. And if I saw a pianist there, I would oftentimes say to them, if you're really concerned about having extra income, you might investigate trying to take your piano technique and apply it to the organ. I said, financially, you could use the extra funding. I said, especially as a beginning teacher. So it's not that you're going to have to work overtime, so to speak, to do this. But I said, you could do that. I said, you're young enough where if you have your keyboard technique, which you do, I said, you need to add your pedal technique to it and then go from there. Um, I know that there were other people there, one in particular who was on the faculty with me, who said, how much playing do you do in church? I said, you would be amazed. I said, even though I'm now retired from my full-time public school job and I teach university work, I said, I am free on Saturday or Sunday. So I said, if I get the opportunity to play, and I know it's a great, organ, and I'm comfortable going there, I said, I always say yes, because I know how hard it is to find a substitute. So I would encourage them in that way as much as possible. And if I was still teaching private piano, which I don't, I would usually find out who of my students were really good, on the piano and dedicated, and say, you could take this and go a lot farther with it, with your keyboard technique, and add it to the, with the pedal, and be able to deal with that type of thing in church. I think the more we say it, we can't say it enough, but I think the more we say it, hopefully that will help down the road. I think the AGO type of encounters are very, very good, and hopefully we should do more of that, around the country. But I think anything we can do on local chapter, that would be helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Call to action for organists.
You got it. We need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and it's been a pleasure. And I'll see you at the next meeting.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, take care.
You too.